Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Republican Representative Joe Kitchens of Sturgeon Bay is seeking re-election in the 1st Assembly District. Joe, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Thank you, and thanks for doing these things.
Well, appreciate it. You are co-chair of a study committee looking at some school funding options.
Right.
And it comes in the context of the current state budget, which had a big increase, a big upper for K-12 and state aid.
Yes.
And part of your testimony, I'm sure you've heard, is that we need another big upper in state aid.
Right.
Do we?
Well, you know, I think that when we do this commission, and we'll be coming out with our recommendations end of the year, beginning of next, you know, we're hopeful to have it in the budget next time.
Okay.
But I think we recognize that we need to hold districts harmless as much as possible in how we distribute the money. So that is going to require some money, because we know that if we have a lot of districts that are losers in our new plan, that it's not going to pass politically. So fortunately, I think there's a lot of appetite right now to do more with education. And luckily, the economy in Wisconsin is doing extremely well, so our revenues have been good. So I think it's a really good time to do it.
Well, now I hear both Governor Walker and Mr. Evers saying we should go back to 2/3. Does that help or hurt your study panels, commissions at looking at all the options?
Yeah. Well, I mean, ideally we would go back to 2/3. I don't know that we can do that right away. It dropped down, I think, in the Doyle administration below 2/3, and now we've been creeping up a little bit. It would be nice to get it back to 2/3, but I think the main thing is to put money in the hands of the schools. So many times when we do these things for the school districts, it's really tax relief, and it's not money that they can use in the classroom. So I hope that we can put more money into the classroom.
Is one of the options recommending a new school aid formula?
Yeah, absolutely. My charge with this from Speaker Voss was to be big and bold, and we're looking at everything. And whether I don't know that we'll totally throw it out, but I expect us to have some recommendations that'll change it a good bit, and I think we have a good chance of making some real changes in it.
My experience in the Capitol leads me to believe that you can't rewrite a school aid formula unless there's no losers. Are we going to have the money to?
Well, and we'll see you're absolutely right. If we have a lot of losers, I mean, politicians are going to look at how it affects their districts, and if they have losers, we're not going to get it done. So we know there's going to be a price tag to this.
Part of the debate with K-12 is the growth in vouchers and choice. Milwaukee, Racine, now statewide. Should choice expand further?
You know, first off, I think that the choice program has given options to kids, and I think there are kids that have very much benefited from it and gotten opportunities they would not have otherwise had. And I also think that if you look back, we've had them for, 25 years, and in all that time, there's never been a Democratic or Republican bill to get rid of them. So they're here to stay. So my focus has always been on holding them responsible, making sure that they meet the same standards that public schools meet. I have questions about statewide expansion, unlimited expansion. I think there's a study being done right now to show whether we can afford it. That's my concern, is that can we really afford this? And until they can convince me of that, I can't support unlimited expansion.
Every time I interview you, I have to ask about progress dealing with the groundwater contamination in Kewaunee County. Yep. Has major progress been made since the last time we talked?
Yeah, there has been a lot of progress, actually. The really big thing is that we got the DNR rewrote rules for NR 151, which affects how you spread manure, and they did rules that are specific to our area. And that's what we've been asking for a long time, because our geology is different from the rest of the state. Yes. And so those went into effect this July. I think it's going to have a big impact. And it worked out really well. We were able to get actually all of the conservation groups endorsed it, as well as Farm Bureau, Dairy Business Association. So I think it's great that the farmers are recognizing that they're part of the problem, and they need to step up and be part of the solution.
Some environmental leaders want a moratorium on CAFOs. Is that reasonable?
I don't think that's going to happen. I think that what we can do, and what these new rules do, is that they limit how much manure you can put on, so you can't have any more cows than you have land to spread manure on. So the size will be limited that way. I don't think that we are ever going to just say you can only have this many cows. But we can say if you're going to have that many cows, you have to have this much land. And that's how we'll limit the growth.
The Foxconn tax breaks and tax incentives and the Assembly vote on February 22nd for Kimberly-Clark, Foxconn-like incentives, raise the question, what should be the criteria for state government to offer tax breaks, tax benefits for private companies?
Right. I think Foxconn is a much easier situation, and I do support what we did for Foxconn. You know, the economic analysis shows an $18 return for every dollar in tax breaks that we are giving. And people need to remember that they don't get any tax breaks until they hire the people and they build the factory. You know, this issue has been so politicized and distorted. I was on a trip recently with other Midwestern legislators, and every one of those states would have given anything to have gotten Foxconn. Michigan offered $600 million more. Ohio kept fighting for it even after the decision was made, trying to get them to change their mind. In Illinois, the Democratic legislature had a hearing in the Capitol, demanding to know why they weren't under consideration for Foxconn. So I think everyone else recognizes that this is a good deal for Wisconsin, but again, it's been so politicized here. I think the biggest argument in favor of Foxconn to me is when you look at the southeast Wisconsin and Milwaukee in particular, at one time we had one of the narrowest gaps in achievement between African Americans and whites. We had all those high-paying factory jobs, but beginning in the 70s, those jobs started leaving, those factories left. And now we're dealing with all of the social problems that result from that, from not having family-supporting jobs. This is an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, really, to transform the economy in southeastern Wisconsin and to turn it into a high-tech area. To me, when you ask this question, if people say they're opposed to Foxconn, I think your follow-up ought to be, okay, if you're opposed to Foxconn, what's your plan for southeast Wisconsin? Because to continue the same old, and putting Band-Aids on these problems and guaranteeing that we're going to have another generation that's dependent on government is foolhardy, and I think that should be the question. This is a chance to really turn things around down there.
Widespread frustration in the Capitol at the gridlock, the deadlock on transportation, highway funding.
Right.
How'd you like to see a solution come about?
Yeah, and that was one of my big disappointments from the last session, maybe the biggest disappointment, that we did not come up with a sustainable funding source for transportation. We've done a lot, I think, to gain efficiency. We did a study on that, and we've looked at all of that. We got rid of prevailing wage, but we know that there's not enough money there to pay for the roads. We have to have a new funding source. Really, the problem came about in large part when the previous administration ended indexing on gas tax, whereby it would go up with the price of gas. And then with, again, increasing efficiencies of cars, we're getting less revenue all the time, and costs are going up. So we have to have a better source of funding. I'm open to all solutions. I think we need to look at the gas tax. I think we definitely need to put indexing back in. Need to look at gas tax, registration. I'm open to anything, but we can't just keep borrowing money. We have to have a sustainable solution.
When tolls are mentioned in the Capitol, your reaction?
I'm willing to look at it, but our roads weren't built for tolls, so it would have to be retrofitted. From studies I've seen, it's like a very inefficient tax where it's like 25% of what comes in would have to go out towards infrastructure. So if that's the case, I'm not in favor of that. But I'm willing to look at anything. We have to increase funding for transportation.
A big issue in the next budget is the Department of Corrections budget. Some Democrats who ran for governor said we could cut the prison population by half over a period of years. Green Bay Prison and Waupun built in the 1800s. Do we need a new prison, state prison?
Well, I mean, first off, we do need to do everything that we can to reduce the prison population. I think those candidates that were saying a 50% reduction, that's ridiculous. I mean, we would have to be putting violent criminals back on the streets, and none of us want that. I think we're going to need to replace certainly the Green Bay Correctional Institute. In this past budget, it called for, I think, $26 million in repairs. It's a very old facility. It requires much more staffing than a new facility would require. So I think we can build a new one, or, as has been proposed, have a private builder build it to our specifications and then lease it. And I think we could do that and save money in the long run. So I think we need to do that. Those facilities are way outdated.
Local governments have lived with levy limits for 14 years. You've heard the concerns that they're hurting the ability to provide local services.
Right.
Keep local levy limits to control property taxes, dial them back, or get rid of them.
Yeah, and I dealt with them as school board president for a long time, and nobody likes them. I will say that they do force you to make tough decisions, and you do find waste that you can eliminate. I also think that once they're in place, it's very, very tough to get rid of them. I think the general public likes the concept that if you're going to raise my taxes, you need to ask me first. So I don't see them going away. I would be in favor of easing them to some extent. I think that we can't just choke our local governments, and they certainly are creating hardships. They're having a tough time providing services, certainly fixing roads. UW
system budget, do we continue the freeze on resident undergrad tuition for a 7th and 8th year?
That I'm going to have to look at the numbers, see what we have available. I think it's been a great thing. People talk about the student loan debt crisis. I think what we have done by freezing the tuition has helped that tremendously. And I would like to see that continue, but I don't know whether we can afford it or not. We'll have to look at that. We need to take care of our UW system. We have a first-class university system. We have to make sure we maintain that.
The proposals in the Capitol that would legalize recreational and medical marijuana?
I hate this question because everyone thinks it's such a simple question. It's actually not a simple question at all. I mean, first off, we can legalize marijuana in Wisconsin, but it's still against federal law. People don't realize that in Colorado and those other states, at any time, the federal government could go in and shut that down and arrest those people. So, I think the federal government needs to step up and take care of some of that, at least give us the authority. I do believe marijuana has medicinal qualities. And I think if it came forward, I would vote in favor of it very reluctantly, because we also have the Food and Drug Administration. That's supposed to protect our consumers so that they know what they're buying, so they know it's safe, they know it's effective. It just seems ridiculous that we would be selling medicine without any of those safeguards. So again, I think I would vote for it because I do think the federal government has shirked their responsibility, but it would be reluctant. Recreational marijuana, I think that some of the states that are doing that right now they're seeing some difficulties with it. So I think we need to monitor that for a little while longer and see how that's going before we go in that direction.
I know you're hearing from voters the issue of health care. How do we protect and maybe expand health care in rural Wisconsin?
Yeah, and that's a real problem in rural areas. I think, I was part of the rural initiative that was looking at, our rural areas are getting so much older. They're not retaining their young people. A big part of that's healthcare, and the other part's education, that we need to make sure that we maintain those in those rural areas. I think part of it's going to be we need to increase the Medicaid reimbursement. I think that really puts the squeeze on those rural areas, especially as they continue to get older. So I think we should do that. I think we need to look at creative ways, and we did part of it as part of the rural initiative in attracting doctors to go to those rural areas, because they have a tough time maintaining them. They can make a lot more money going into cities. I think the new medical school we have in Green Bay, they're really focusing on that primary care and on the rural health care, and I think that's going to be a big help as well.
State government have a role in recruiting and retaining physicians, nurses, and other medical professionals?
Yeah, I think we have to. And, part of it, Medicaid and the whole reimbursement, where they're not really making as much back, hospitals are not supporting themselves with that. They're having to subsidize that. So I think we've created part of that problem. So I certainly think that we have part of the responsibility for solving it.
There's a pilot program between state government and Delta Dental that provides dental care in some clinics for low-income residents. Mm-hmm. Should that be a priority in the next Medicaid budget?
I think that's a very interesting pilot program, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results on that. I think people don't realize what a huge effect dental care has on your overall health. If you have bad teeth, you have a lot of other problems. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that works out. I would love to be able to do that, but I'd like to see the results first.
Have you heard from any caregivers expressing concerns? AARP estimates that there are 578,000 Wisconsin residents who are caregivers for family members or neighbors, others they love. Would you support laws or regulations that call for hospitals to recognize family caregivers when their loved ones are hospitalized? Have you heard of this issue? Yeah, it's not something that's been at the forefront for me at all. Certainly we should do everything we can to support those families that are doing that, but no, I don't have any specific answers for you on that. The state government set aside $100 million for school safety grants. Is it enough, or do we need new gun laws? Well, I think that we can do some common sense gun laws. I think that I would like to look at what they did in Florida as far as keeping guns out of the hands of people that they know potentially have mental health problems. So I'm certainly willing to look at that. I think there are some common sense gun laws that can be enacted.
I would be in favor of banning bump stocks. You know, it's silly to me to allow something to be legal that the sole purpose is to get around the law. So I'm certainly willing to look at that. But I think the big thing we need to look at is mental health. And you know, we are trying to put more money into schools. And I think that the $100 million, of course, it's never going to be enough. But I think that will go a long way towards making those schools safer.
Difference between you and your independent candidate on November 6th?
Well, you know, I think what I have going for me, I guess, is my background as a large animal veterinarian, as a school board president. I think that I understand the problems that business owners and the agriculture community, as well as the schools, face, and I also have credibility with those groups, so I can talk to them. And you know, I think there are a lot of people that get into the legislature and they just vote on bills. And even if you agree with them 100% of the time on every bill that they vote for, what are they really accomplishing? It's a much smaller number of people that can actually get things done. And I think I've proven I can get things done. You know, to be able to come in there with an idea, to be able to usher it through the committee, through the assembly, through the Senate, and get the governor to sign it. Again, an awful lot of people don't do that, but I think I've done it numerous times. You know, I think if you look at the Kewanee seawall that we funded, the Bay shipbuilding, we were able to put money into them to redo their harbor. The NR 151 rules for manure, the TMDL study that we have for the rivers of Doran, Kewanee, Manitowoc, and Sheboygan counties, that was my budget motion. So I think I've proven that I can be a very effective advocate for our area, and I'm a results guy. I want to get things done. Republican
Representative Joel Kitchens of Sturgeon Bay is seeking re-election in the 1st Assembly District. Joel, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.